Warning: most items used in this video can be dangerous both physically and chemically. If you wish to attempt, make sure to take proper safety measures before proceeding. Anyways, enjoy the video. Thomas Monroe, for a majority of its earlier years, had a lot of high quality and accurate models, with their simple but accurate designs. However, like most ranges, the size accuracies of some engines are pretty off, most notably the narrow gauge engines. Now, don't get me wrong, I think all of Learning Curve's earlier narrow gauge models are fantastic. Great faces, good detail, can't go wrong with any of them really. So, you may ask, what's the issue? Well, take a look at these pictures. This is a side image of Thomas's model, and this is a side image of Duncan's. As you can see, Thomas is obviously bigger since he's standard gauge. Now, here's their wooden railway models. I think you can see the issue. So, I decided to take it upon myself to remake the narrow gauge engine to be more accurate size-wise, but also add some unpresent details. The engine I decided to do first was Duncan, since he's one of the few narrow gauge engines I actually own, which makes it a lot easier to reference than just looking at a picture. Anyways, with the intro out of the way, where do we begin? Before I started ordering anything, I started with a blueprint. My original idea was that I was gonna make him the same length as a wooden railway tender, but that idea was soon scrapped after realizing the tender was too small to cram in all the details. Instead, I decided to go for a lady-sized chassis, as it was small but still big enough to keep all its details. Soon I ordered a knockoff Duncan off AliExpress, and surprisingly enough, it came a week early. So with the model in hand, I could start the custom. First came the disassembly. Due to the superglue being cheap as well as very poorly applied, made taking it apart fairly easy, but of course I still ended up cutting myself trying to scrape off the excess wood with my X-Acto blade. Great start, but despite that mishap, soon the basic parts of the model were disassembled. But then came cutting off the excess wood. It took a bit of time to cut, but in the end I succeeded. Unfortunately, however, one of the coat bunkers were broken. To replace it, I sanded down the boiler piece to the same dimensions as the coat bunker. It wasn't perfect, but for what it was at the time, I thought it worked. Other parts of the model were also tweaked, like shortening down the running board, and soon moved on to disassembling the chassis. The process was a lot easier compared to the body, as all I had to do was cut in half the chassis and remove the wheels. And this time, I didn't cut myself. Yippee! Then I sanded the chassis pieces and filled them together with a lot more wood filler than I probably should have used, but in the end it worked out pretty well. Now comes one of the most distinctive parts of the model, the face. Using nail polish remover, I left the face and a bowl of it to remove the face painting for an hour or two, until I came back to it and saw that the face had disintegrated. So, turns out, nail polish remover is actually really strong and is able to disintegrate a lot of material very easily, especially cheap plastic. Thanks to my dumb mistake, I had to order another Duncan, which, funnily enough, also came a week early. Finally being able to work on it again, I removed the face on the Duncan, and instead of soaking it in nail polish remover, I carefully wet the face with a Q-tip. And it worked! Going back to the body, I edited its domes to look less round and more square, using some wood filler and pliers, as well as changing the funnel size with some air seal clay. The first time around, I used the clay wrong. For context, the outer shell of the clay is white, with the inner clay being gray, and mixing the two together allows the clay to work as cell in the tube. I thought the inner gray clay was just clay that was unexposed to any light, giving it a darker shade. Obviously, I was wrong, and eventually realized my mistake after a week of waiting for it to dry. As you can tell, I was very unexperienced with this stuff, but I did do it again, and this time it worked. After 10 to 20 minutes, it was sanded down and superglued onto the smoke box. Afterwards, I decided to go back and change something about the model I didn't like, the custom coal bunker. Considering I had a second Duncan that had coal bunkers, I cut off one of them and used that instead, as it fitted way better than the janky one I made. Now all the pieces were finished, and we can finally get to the painting process. First, I applied a paint primer as opposed to common spray primer, as I already had some lying around. Nevertheless, it worked just as well and dried quite quickly too. Now I could start painting. First, I painted the chassis and smoke box, as they were the easiest to paint with them only being black, and then painted the body. This turned out to be a bad idea, as I neglected to compensate needing to fill in the extra gaps with wood filler, meaning I would have to repaint it again once it was applied. Great. However, this turned out to be a blessing in disguise, as I was either way unhappy with how the paint looked. So, in a way, this gave me the opportunity to redo it, and I'm very glad I did, as the second result looks way better than before. So, with the base paint finalized, I painted the cab roof as well as some coal in the coal bunkers, as, to be honest, they don't really look like coal bunkers on the original model. Now came the part I was most worried about, painting the face. Originally, I wanted to give him his mischievous face, as I thought it suited him better than the regular smiling face. Unfortunately, due to the mold of the face, I couldn't do it, so instead, I decided to give him my own mischievous look, and thankfully, it turned out great. Now our model was almost complete, but before he gets his clear coat, he needs some decals. Making them was simple enough, as most Winroy designs are pretty simplistic, but what was difficult was trying to print them the right color. For good measure, I printed the body decals in 3 different shades of yellow, as they usually appear different on paper compared to on screen. The chassis decals turned out quite well, as it's literally just a black bar with lettering. On the other hand, the body decals, specifically the opposite-sided ones, were too short. So I resized them and printed them again. This time the printer decided to print them a different shade, even though the colors were unchanged. I printed at least 7 to 8 different pages until deciding to just hand draw them instead on the leftover paper from the first set of decals. It looked a little off, but considering how long it was taking to print them correctly, I think it works. Except for how the number 6 looked. So I took a piece from one of the extra copies and cutted the 6 out and glued it on. Looking back, I kinda regret it as it doesn't blend in as well anymore, but it was definitely better than this. Now that the decals were glued on, we're pretty much done. All that was left to do was give him some clear coat, assemble him with glue, and soon, Duncan was finished. As my first custom, I think Duncan turned out pretty well. Sure, there were quite a few issues trying to make him, but considering this is my first time doing this, mistakes are bound to happen. But hey, not everyone does it a perfect first try. On the bright side, there were a lot of things I can take away and learn from doing this to improve in the future, and you might be able to as well if you decide to do custom making. As you all may have noticed, I haven't been uploading as often since October, and this custom has been a big reason for that. But now that he's finished, I have a lot more time to work on videos, and hopefully I'll get back to uploading more regularly next year, if my exams will let me. So with that said, Merry Christmas everyone, and I hope to see you all again next year.